My name is Kganya Mogashoa. I am currently a full-time visual artist, currently based in Johannesburg, in South Africa. And I have been full-time in visual art since 2020. I initially studied interior design in my varsity years from 2013 to 2016, but I always felt the inclination to go back to art. I did visual art as a subject when I was in high school for 3 years, and after that I was kind of afraid to take art as a full-time course because I just felt like maybe I needed another career to fall back on financially. I just wasn't sure, but I knew that it was the one thing that I was the best at out of all the other subjects that I ever did. And also just feeling concerned about how my parents would feel about it. So I did a little bit of research about what is the closest to the best thing I could do that could probably guarantee an income of some sorts. And I decided to study interior design. However, I went over the years longing to be an artist instead. And so I did get some jobs, some interior design office jobs from 2017 to 2019, and it always just felt like something was missing. I always never felt fulfilled and honestly never felt happy. But I think I don't regret those years because I learned a great deal from my experiences and I use them as an anchor to help me with the journey that I'm on now. I don't think I would have met some of the people that I had met if I hadn't taken that path. And I really do believe that there isn't a single day in our lives that goes wasted. So I'm grateful for the lessons that came with it. And when I had finished working in 2019, before I even resigned, I thought about what kind of life I wanted to have. And I remember sitting in the office someday and just feeling like God really spoke to my heart and asked me a very simple question. And the question was, do you see a future for yourself in this office right now? And I looked around the office and I saw people typing away on their computers. And my answer was no, I don't. And I felt like God was saying to me, well, if you had to die in the next 24 hours, how would you account for those last 24 hours you spent? What would you say you did with that time? What kind of a legacy do you think you would have left behind? And I just looked around again and I thought to myself that this cannot be it. This cannot be all that I'm living for. This cannot be the ultimate goal of my life. There has to be more. I knew that I needed to go back to the art because that's where I felt whole. That's where I felt like I was happier. And so it was just a buildup of events that led me to deciding to quit my job. It was the hardest decision, of course, because of finances. It definitely was a life-altering decision. And I really have great respect for people who continue working while pursuing their art careers. There's nothing wrong with either or. I think that everyone's path is different, and it's okay to take the one that works best for you. But I really felt like I needed to move out of the space that I was in order to embark on my journey. And so I started just growing in my faith too, and just leaning on God to provide and to show me how to move forward with my life. But what I can say is that I felt fulfilled even though I didn't have everything I wanted. Of course, there were times where I felt like, what if I made a mistake? But looking back, I would not ever go back. Even if I had to be offered the job again, I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't change anything. With regards to my background, I sort of grew up in many different places because my parents were separated. So, when people ask me where I'm from, I don't really know what to say, really, because I just remember moving a lot. Staying at my mom's place, staying at my dad's place, staying at my grand's place. So, there was just a lot of moving. But what I can say is that the places that I resided in was Johannesburg and Pretoria and surrounding areas. And so I just, grew up like any other kid with, a gift. I was good at art since I was little. And in fact, I was the top student for art when I was in high school at some stage when I was 17 years old. And I think that really marked a very significant event in my life. I was never really, an academic in the sense that I never used to get awards for anything. And so when I was recognized as top student for visual art, it was a shock to my system. It was my first time being the best at anything in my entire life. I was never good at anything else. I was never good at sports. I was never good at, any other activities that were happening at school. So I always felt like I didn't know what I was good at. I felt like a failure most of the time. But I think when I became top student for art, I thought, okay, maybe I do have something. But at that time, it hadn't really registered either to myself or my parents that this is it. So there was just a lot of experimenting and trying to see what else I can do. I know how my father really wanted me to be an accountant, but my brain was just not wired for that. So I was never really good at it. I just, did enough to just get through it, but I'm glad I never pursued it further. It probably would have led to a lot of depressive episodes, God knows. But one of the things that stood out for me was an encounter that I had in a dream where I just saw myself standing somewhere in like a stadium-like place. And I remember just going through a season of praying and really just feeling like I don't know where my life is going. And I felt like God was just knocking on my heart and just saying, this is it. And I just saw myself standing there, and I saw like thousands and thousands and thousands of people I couldn't even count painting away, and they just looked so happy. And I thought to myself that I wonder what that feels like. And I remember looking at an empty canvas and an empty easel, and I saw just like a figure of Jesus walking towards me and pointing towards that empty canvas. And I just knew that this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I kind of felt bad because I thought to myself, why is this canvas empty if it's mine? That gave me an indication that I wasn't, fulfilling what I was supposed to be fulfilling with my mandate. I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. And so it really started to answer a lot of questions around why I felt the way I did. In any case, I decided to resign from my job in December 2019. 2020 was a bit of a rough start. It was the lockdown. There was COVID restrictions all of a sudden, and things just changed the year that I decided that I'm going to be a visual artist. And now I'm new to this environment. I don't know what to expect. I did enter a lot of competitions when I was in school. I mean, not in school, but when I was working. And I found myself in situations where I either had to leave the office early or I had to ask my boss if I could, take a day off because I wanted to participate in some art events. And so, it was a little bit hard to manage both work and doing what I do. But ultimately, I had to make a decision. And so I chose art. At the beginning of 2020, I decided to you know, just trust the process and do what it is that I wanted to do. And interestingly enough, my career picked up very quickly. My background did influence, my creative process a lot. I think that I grew up in a space where my father, nurtured me a lot. And I often say that he treated me like a queen. He did quite a lot for me. So, I never really grew up in a very, I guess, environment where my dad would make me always prepare meals and, do the typical, what they call housewife chores or, chores that society, says that women should have to, partake in activities that, women should partake in according to social constructs. So I really grew up seeing my dad doing all those things for me, cooking for me, preparing things for me. I was never made to feel like I belong in the kitchen or anything like that. We pretty much had, shared responsibilities, which is why when I stepped out into the world and interacted with other people's homes and how they did things, it did a little something in my mind. It made me question a lot of things and wonder why, certain roles are the way that they are. And I would definitely feel a lot of discomfort if somebody would ask me to help them out in the kitchen because I'm a girl or something like that. I would often just question some things. And so it really changed my perspective a lot. My upbringing, it made me see the world of art in a different way too, because the more I started growing in the creative sector, the more I started to realize that, hey, there's only a few women artists. Why is that? How come our stories are not being told by us? And so I think that really challenged me to take up the position in society to speak up about some things that, go through our minds and our hearts and our feelings, and to represent the true essence of how we feel as women on a daily basis. And just the frustration of some of the social ills that I would see around me in my community, and my heart breaking for women going through things like gender-based violence. It really just made me feel like if I cannot be in a position to do something about it, let me at least paint about it. Let me use the gift I have to do something about it. And that's where it basically all started for me. I think that my biggest influences, one of them mainly, I always say, is God. I believe that every solution that we need comes from him, and that there is no problem that he doesn't have answers to. And so I personally seek solace in that through all the challenges that we have, that he does have an answer, and there is a hope and a solution for things that feel hopeless. And so I like to share some of that encouragement through my work to show people that, yeah, we might be going through the things we're going through now, but we can come up with a way to move forward that will change the trajectory of our lives forever. And maybe even the next generations of women and men won't have to experience some of the things that we're going through right now. And we can help them to bypass some of the social ills we have now if we act on the gifts that we have. And so I believe that every gift we have is an answer to some of the solutions that we're looking for. And it just came from a place of me realizing that I have to be the change I want to see. I cannot be waiting for somebody else to change it. I have to do something. I may not be able to change the entire world, but I think that if each and every single person had to have a voice, actually not have a voice, but use their voice rather, there would definitely be a difference in some way, one way or another. I think that one of my favorite artists who encourages me is Makoto Fujimura. I just really appreciate the way that he engages with godly values in his art, and just how he always stays true to himself. You know, his artwork is not influenced by any trends or anything like that. He just, really, really stays true to the essence of what is in his heart when he creates. And just his work ethic too. I think that I really appreciate people who genuinely do put in diligence in their work. Right now, I am focusing a lot on research. One of the things that I want to do is study history so that I can be able to come up with persuasive arguments around why I paint about, the women that I paint about. My artworks are based a lot on women who have left a lasting impact in the world. And the current series that I'm doing right now is titled Shiro's Rants, which is basically about various African women, around the world being represented on our currency, our banknotes, and our coins. But I've pretty much just created a rendition of that, and just, a lot of meaning around it and what it looks like to take up your position as a woman in the world today, and what kind of future we're creating for ourselves. A lot of the times we focus a lot on the past, but we don't talk a lot about where we're going. Where do we see ourselves in the next 10 years, 20 years, 40 years to come, even beyond, our lives on this earth. I think one of my biggest challenges as an artist right now is definitely financial stability. I think because I'm still growing in my career, I think I'm still young and still trying to figure it out. But I am learning quite a lot about how to create a balance between my passion and my financial stability, because both are just as important. So I think that, yeah, that's something that it's a progressive journey. It's a learning curve that I haven't fully figured out. I would be lying to anybody if I said I did. And I'm really so grateful to all my mentors for assisting me to make informed decisions, which is something that I would really encourage anybody out there who's trying to figure out this art journey, to surround yourself with mentorship and wise counsel from those who have gone before you. I think the advice that I would give to my younger self is to always stay true to yourself. That is something that I always, anchor myself in, and to just trust, that wherever God has, led you, He will create provision for that, wherever it is. It's definitely not an easy journey. Anything that is going to lead you to your purpose is definitely going to come with a lot of challenges and difficult seasons. In terms of the mediums that I have tried, I have experimented with, acrylic, oil, and right now I'm experimenting with sculpture and printmaking. I think that I'm in a phase in my career where I feel like it's okay to experiment, In fact, I think it's okay for everybody to experiment with different mediums. I'm not too fixated on sticking to one thing. I think it's a good way of growing as an artist. So I'm really excited about the printmaking art and the sculptures that I'll be working on this year. Um, in terms of the music I listen to when I paint, I often listen to worship music. Sometimes some jazz, sometimes some deep house, and sometimes even just listening to podcasts while I'm painting. I think that I always look for opportunities to grow in wisdom, whenever I get a chance. Sometimes I watch, or I rather play a movie while I'm painting. I like listening to movies that are based on true stories, and sometimes stories about the women that I'm painting about in my artwork. I often like to document stories of women whose stories that are often not documented, that are often not told. There's so many women who've left a lasting impact in the world, but nobody knows who they are. Sometimes they're named after street names and buildings and hospitals. We drive past them every day, but we don't even know who they are. We've never seen their faces. We've just become out of touch with the reality of those who have set the precedence for, you know, where we're walking right now. And it's something that I've learned to really celebrate, which also encourages me that if they could do it with the limited resources they had, then I definitely can do it too. I think the best reaction to my work has been a lady who came by to my studio and she just broke down and cried, and she was like, "Thank you so much, for doing this." I think that as women, we often face a lot of criticism in our work and our choice of, subject and theme. I think that's why a lot of women who come in contact with my work feel so emotional, because there's not a lot of women who really openly speak about certain things because of fear of being, politically incorrect, art critics and all of that, which is a reality that every artist has to go through. But I think as women, we sometimes shrink back because of fear that, maybe if I say this, nobody's going to buy my art, nobody's going to listen. But I realized over time that the stories that I tell and the things I talk about through my work are things that people are longing to talk about, to hear about more often. And it's often ideas that are silently, thought about. People think about it sometimes that, hey, how come we don't have a woman president? How come, you know, I mean, it's things that people think about, but they don't openly say it that, actually, yeah, I am a woman, but I don't feel comfortable being in the kitchen. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And so I think that it's sometimes a very uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's a necessary one because these are real thoughts and feelings that so many women, go through on a daily basis. And often they feel alone in those thoughts because they don't have anyone to process them with out of fear of judgments. And so I guess it's the tears sometimes that people shed, which sometimes make me wonder, like, wow, I never thought that, my work would have such an impact in someone's life. What I hope people would take away from my work is mainly that God loves them, first and foremost, and that there is a solution for every problem. And if we are willing to action and activate those solutions enough, we will overcome. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually we will overcome. There's different phases to human life. I think that, yes, we do go through a lot of notions that sometimes are deemed as, different in society. But if you think about every single person who's changed the world, it's people that stood up for things that seemed crazy at that time that people didn't understand. If you think about things like, slavery and the apartheid system, just how it took so much courage and so many years, for some things, some social constructs that were inhumane to be destabilized. And at that time, when people were revolting, it seemed crazy. It seemed like this is abnormal. Society was not willing to accept it, but eventually they did. They saw the wrong in it, and people grew to see that some things that are deemed socially acceptable, culturally acceptable, are actually not. Things that we've grown up with that have been normalized are sometimes the things that actually become attributes to us, fostering negative cycles in people's lives and even in our own lives. We limit ourselves by normalizing the wrong thinking patterns about each other. And in my context, I basically challenge social constructs that have been normalized, traditional practices sometimes that do contribute to, unhealthy views on women around the world. And my story is a story of emancipation. And that's something that I've always been curious about as a little girl. That when am I going to see myself personally being emancipated from certain things that I didn't agree with and understand. And I think what really propelled me more was the fact that whenever I had questions, they were barely answered. It was always just, this is what is done and this is how it is. But it was just never enough for me to comprehend that answer. And so I decided to dig deeper and do the research for myself. So I think that more than anything, I want people to take away the fact that women are valuable and that they actually deserve more than what they've been given in all our lifetimes combined. My studio at the moment, I'm working at the American Corner in Pretoria. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on Instagram at Corangus_art. That's KORANGS_art. I'm mostly active on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, Kganya Art. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, Kganya Mogashoa. And yeah, those are the platforms that I'm mostly interactive on. And I look forward to connecting with you. Thank you.